1 year ago today, my wife, 32 female, forgot it was our 10th anniversary together, and I, 32 male, have to thank her. This is my story 9 months post-D-Day. I'll refer to her as wife only to represent our current situation. We had been dating for 10 years, were approximately 15 days away from celebrating 2 years of marriage, had no children, the home lease was in her name, and had been living in a completely dead bedroom for 9 months after around 3 months of falling activity. When it happened, it was the stereotypical starfish duty. During those 9 months, she also refused me any type of love, hugs, massages, touches, kisses, etc. She said it was her method of forcing me to work on my PhD thesis. I acknowledged that I needed a reason to write it. I had changed occupations after completing the research portion and was no longer motivated to complete it. As a result, I fell for the abuse disguised as a positive thing. I attempted to push through, and every spare minute I spent in front of my computer attempting to complete the thesis, whilst she spent her time watching TV, using social media, or messaging and contacting her friends. We hardly ever spent time together as a pair anymore. I blocked for about 3 months because I couldn't manage the strain of being trapped in the thesis and the lack of love and rejection every time I attempted to receive a simple hug. I was pleading for affection and continually getting refused. It is soul-shattering. And my thoughts began to drift to suicide ideas. Every time I was alone and not working on my day job, I ended myself thinking about ways to terminate my life, weighing the pros and disadvantages of each option until I finally settled on one. Then I began to consider what messages I would leave behind and to whom. I had a moment of insight when choosing what message I would leave for my sister and had the strength to end it by eliminating what I believed was causing my misery. I chose not to continue attempting to write the thesis, and a few weeks later I stopped asking for love. It worked, and the suicidal impulses ceased. However, we were no longer husband and wife. She spent her time on the phone, texting or contacting someone, and even when we were doing anything together, which was unusual, she would stop it to assist a coworker with weird things. Basically, I and our relationship were at the bottom of her priority list. She began to create a practice of taking phone calls and going to the restroom at times when she should have been sleeping for the previous 9 years. She began going out on weekends with her female friends and coworkers to catch up and talk, which would be dull to me and I wouldn't like, so she went alone. She planned meals followed by long chats in the parking lot, her explanation for coming in the early hours of the morning with her coworkers who I didn't know about, and went without me because I wouldn't fit in or because I was visiting my parents in my hometown. Whenever I complained about her strange behavior, she rejected my worries and made me believe I was insane. When she needed me, she might be kind, but as soon as she didn't, she'd start mistreating me again. The only 2 weeks in those 9 months when she was lovely and tricked me into believing we were back to normal, note with some tenderness, were when she requested me to work on a chapter of her PhD thesis. It had to do with programming, and she has no clue about it. Anyone with half a brain can see that I was being used and abused left and right, but I couldn't see it at the time. Even if you told out every flaw in our relationship, I wouldn't acknowledge it. And if you even suggested she may be cheating on me, I'd be furious. Today marks 1 year when I first opened my eyes. We were on vacation on a gorgeous Mediterranean island, and I was certain we were celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary. Yes, we were in a rough patch, to be fair. Our relationship was already dead, but I could see at the time. But she always made a point to celebrate all the dates, and gift exchange was really important to her. By the way, I'm not that into exchanging gifts, and I've disappointed her on that front before. But for the 10th anniversary, I had gotten her something special and never thought she would let it pass her by despite our recent struggles. So the day arrived, and I proposed going out to supper instead of dining at our apartment, as we had been doing the previous days. She began chastising me because it was a stupid thing to do. Why would we waste money when we could eat perfectly well at our apartment? I told her it was a wonderful day, but I didn't tell her it was our 10th wedding anniversary. She had apparently forgotten why that day was significant. At the end of the day, I hid her gift under her pillow, hoping that when she discovered it, she would remember what made that day so memorable. She discovered it but was perplexed as to why I handed it to her. It was not usual for me to give her gifts out of the blue. Then I realized she'd completely forgotten about it. It may seem little in light of everything else, but when she forgot about it, I was wounded and broken, even more than I was before. Although if you asked me at the time, I didn't believe I was broken. We may have a few minor issues, but everyone does, right? Foolish me talking. On that day, I decided to seek assistance and begin IC without her knowledge, in order to overcome what I believed was our major issue. Our lifeless bedroom. I was so wrong back then. Looking back, the lifeless bedroom was the least of our issues. But what matters is that we made that choice and I began IC as soon as we returned from our trip. And I gradually began to see all of the abusive things I had been subjected to. But I still wanted to mend things, make us work, and go back to being happy like before. The thought of her cheating on me came my head, but I immediately dismissed it. There's no way she'd do that. We're just in a bind. There might be a million benign explanations for her behavior. It took around 3 months of weekly IC and more bouts of full disrespect and even boldness, or is it that she became too comfortable to effectively cover it? For me to start thinking about infidelity as a reason for her abusive behavior. Do you want some specifics? I'm sure you do. She didn't show her phone to anybody, always in her hand or sight, and always with the front facing down. And she carried it with her wherever she went, even the restroom. She had never done any of these things before. Whatever we were doing together, no romantic stuff. Remember dead bedroom. She would pause to respond to a coworker in order to assist him at a more stressed and hectic moment. Today, he needs my assistance. Tomorrow, I may require his assistance. That was her justification. On my birthday, we went out to a club back when there was no COVID-19 with a couple of my old, and they became her pals. She was continually texting on her phone and even answered a call around 3 a.m. stating it was her female friend Emily, false name, but I discovered out early in the conversation that she was lying and she wasn't talking to Emily. Who the phone's anybody at 3 a.m., much alone a married couple? Why would you answer the phone call? Why would you make up a story about who it was? Why are you on the phone for an hour with this unknown individual at 3 a.m.? While we were celebrating my birthday with our friends, with whom we don't get to hang out very often because life happens. I believe you all guessed correctly who it was. But I didn't realize it at the time, and I hadn't even suspected it. I simply assumed that was another act of disrespect. On another occasion, we discussed going to the movies on Friday night since it was the final chance to see a movie we wanted to see. She said she was exhausted and didn't want to go out that day. She preferred to remain at home and relax on the couch. That is something I understand, and that is okay with me. As a result, I also remain at home. After dinner, she receives a call from a male coworker, the same as the previous calls, and agrees to meet for coffee and chat about some upcoming changes in their departments. It hadn't even been an hour since she declared she was too weary to go out. I told her I wouldn't sit home while she went out after ruining our plans, and that I would go to the movies anyway. I know. Not the reply you were anticipating, but trust me, I could have completely stayed at home and not had any fun. That was how I discovered a way to experience some of the pleasure I had intended. Who exactly are you? Me from the past? Of course, she instantly changes into a lovely summer dress, very simple to pull up, if you see what I mean, and follows him. Yep, he picked her up near our building. No, I did not see him. Yes, I was a moron. I was irritated by the disrespect. But cheating was at the bottom of my list of possible explanations. When I go home from the movie, she isn't there. I dialed, but no one answered. I called again, but there was no response. I sent her a text message. This is not the time for a female to be out. She responds, I'll be home in half an hour. Stay tuned for the next part.